And that helped. I mean, it helped the many people who up to that point had been regarded as ciphers. I mean, it must have meant a lot to people that they could tell their story. They could tell their story to a commission that was sympathetic. It was a commission that had been set up by a president they loved.
How far has South Africa come since the days of apartheid, or the end of apartheid?
Well, we're fantastic. I mean, we really are an amazing bunch of people. My dream is for the time when we will have a society where everybody feels they matter. That it doesn't actually matter whether they are schooled or not, whether they have a huge bank balance or not. Just the fact that they are South Africans and they are in their country, they know they can walk tall. They know that they can say how they feel, and someone is going to listen.
What I'm angry and want to protest about is
the camera work should have shown a little more of
the context within which his comments were being made.
I'll never forget the build-up and then the wonderful feeling, followed by football.
What about the pigs and the sheep?
Or many other serious and proper news stories in the UK.
When you question the news, we question the newsmakers.
I'm joined by the controller of the BBC News Channel. What have you got to say to those viewers?
Newswatch, Friday at 8:45 on the BBC News Channel.
It's the biggest political drama of recent times. The deal-making and power-broking that built our new government. Now, for the first time, David Cameron, Nick Clegg, Alistair Campbell and other key players from all sides tell their exclusive stories of what went on behind the closed doors of Westminster. 5 days that changed Britain. Thursday at 9 on BBC Two.
BP's chief executive is to stand down within the next 24 hours. The heavily criticised Tony Hayward is negotiating his departure after the oil spill crisis in the Gulf of Mexico.
I think it was absolutely inevitable. We're talking here of damaged goods. We're talking here of someone who is public enemy number one in the US.
Organisers of the music festival in Germany, where 19 people died, say that it'll never be held again. In Afghanistan, NATO is accused of killing civilians in a missile strike. It denies responsibility, but says it's investigating. And Ferrari is fined $100,000 over illegal team orders, which allowed Fernando Alonso to win in Germany.
For me, it was theft. They stole from us the opportunity of having a wheel-to-wheel contest between those two drivers. Ferrari should be ashamed of themselves.
Good evening. BP's chief executive Tony Hayward is to stand down from the company within the next 24 hours. He's been heavily criticised for his handling of the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. A formal announcement on Mr Hayward's future is due tomorrow, as our business correspondent Joe Lynham explains.
They have been the images which have filled our screens for over 3 months. And the face of this disaster has been BP's chief executive, Tony Hayward. Apart from the environmental catastrophe, it's been a PR disaster as well for BP and its boss.
There's no one who wants this thing over more than I do. I'd like my life back. I wasn't part of that decision-making process. Again, I was not involved in decision-making. It's impossible for me to answer that question.
You're not taking responsibility you're kicking the can down the road and acting as if you have nothing to do with this company.
I think it was absolutely inevitable. We're talking here of damaged goods. We're talking here of someone who is public enemy number one in the US. I don't think there was any way around this. That is not to say that he hasn't attempted to do a brilliant job in clearing up the well, in getting it sorted out.
The anodyne statement from BP headquarters here today said that Chief Executive Tony Hayward is still the boss. And that is, of course, true. But his tenure can now be measured in hours. He is currently negotiating the terms of his departure. Tomorrow there's a board meeting here to discuss new leadership. And on Tuesday, BP is set to post the biggest ever quarterly loss by a British company. America's biggest ever oil spill has also been a business nightmare for BP since April. The cost of trying to cap the burst well could reach between £3 and £6.5 billion. On top of that, BP have promised to set aside £13 billion to compensate firms and individuals affected by the spill, forcing down the value of one of Britain's largest companies by nearly 40%. And this is the man tipped to replace Tony Hayward.